everyone, welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. This is Sebastian Fonseca. We're here to break down all the action across this amazing weekend of divisional round matchups in the NFL playoffs and preview the conference championship round next weekend. But before we get into it, please like and subscribe to the channel. It makes a massive difference in the YouTube algorithm. And also take a look at our Spotify page. Audio from this podcast will be there right after the upload. And also take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. All links are in the description. Kansas City got by the Jacksonville Jaguars 27-20, and they're moving on to their 5th consecutive conference championship game. It's really impressive. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, in every postseason that he's entered so far in his young career, he's come out at least to the conference championship games. That is elite quality there. I mean, just so consistent. But he did suffer a pretty nasty injury. I mean, it seemed that he got rolled up on by a defensive lineman and the ankle was stretched out and looking like typical high ankle sprain, which is obviously can be pretty serious. You can miss a significant amount of time just due to the recovery, but he only missed one series and got the rest after halftime and stuck it out for the second half. I don't think he's going to be missing any playing time, but he's definitely going to be hobbled moving on for the rest of the postseason run. But these Jaguars, they were very impressive. I mean, despite trailing early 7-0, they were able to counter back with a touchdown drive to tie the score at 7 apiece, and then they held the Mahomes-led offense to another field goal just to make it 10-7 after their second possession. Despite them moving the ball pretty well, they just had some issues executing in Kansas City Chief territory. They had an opportunity to tie up the score with a field goal, but sacks, penalties drove them back, so they had to kick the ball off. And after they pinned the Chiefs offense back at the 2-yard line with Chad Henne in at quarterback, because Mahomes was obviously out at this point, they really had a golden opportunity to get a quick 3-and-out, but the exact opposite happened. I mean, they couldn't stop Isaiah Pacheco, who's been a great find for this Chiefs offense. I mean, they've struggled to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the fold with injury history, and then they have Jerick McKinnon, who's kind of a third down back, not really a between the tackles kind of guy. Pacheco had a nice set of runs. I mean, he had busted out a 30-yard plus gain to the 4-yard line that set up the touchdown to go up 17-7. And this was really a backbreaker for Jacksonville. I think if they were able to cash in on that opportunity to get that quick 3, now this could have changed the complexion of this game. In the second half, Mahomes was able to come back, and they were just able to do what they could to keep Jacksonville at bay. It was hovering around a 7-point deficit for much of that third quarter, but then the Chiefs were able to get a key field goal to add on to their lead. After that, Jaguars offense finally woke up. They really missed an opportunity to utilize Travis Etienne, a guy who I'm very high on as a running back. In that drive, he got a bunch of gains and he was able to cap off the drive with a nice cutback to get the lead down to 3. But just right after that, this is when complementary football is just so important, and they allowed a touchdown drive to put the lead back up to 10. The Jags kept it close. I mean, Jamal Agnew was this close to ripping off a kickoff return for a touchdown to cut into that deficit yet again. By the shoelace tackles by Harrison Butker, was able to get him down to the ground. And then later on in that drive, they had a very pivotal first down and goal opportunity, but this time Jamal Agnew fumbled the ball inside the 5-yard line, and that was pretty much it for the Jags. They just didn't have enough time to come back from 10 points. They were able to cover that initial line, so they only lost by 7. I was still disappointed that they just couldn't get away to finish off this game, but overall, I mean, they impressed me. I think that this Jaguars team has had a phenomenal year. They were able to respond back from being 3-7, winning the division, exceeding a lot of expectations, and getting a playoff victory early on in Trevor Lawrence's career is going to be big dividends. And while I think they'll be the future of the AFC, the time is right now for these Chiefs, as now they're advancing to their 5th consecutive AFC championship game. So leading up into this week, we heard all the chatter about the Eagles were on upset alert because the Giants are apparently this hot team. We have to set the record straight that the Giants were a decent team. They started off very strongly, winning a lot of tight ball games, but then they got into a little bit of a lull at the back end after November, and they won an impressive game on the road last week against Minnesota, who is a 13-4 win team, but I told you the Minnesota Vikings were frauds. They were the most underwhelming 13-4 team that I've ever seen. The Giants came in with confidence, of course, but they haven't faced a defense like the Eagles, and they've been able to keep the Giants in check in their previous two matchups. The Eagles jumped all over them. I mean, it was 28-0 at halftime. Danny Dimes came back down to earth, and I was really impressed by the Eagles defense in particular. Like I said, the Giants really haven't faced a defense like the Eagles, and they've had trouble with them all season. Hassan Reddick really got the better of Andrew Thomas for most of this game, and was in the face of Danny Dimes for most of this ballgame, having 1.5 sacks, a strip sack included, and the pressure was just altering throws. He threw an interception to James Bradbury, a former Giant, by the way. Just want to make that clear that they cut him in June, and that was a huge mistake, but thank you, New York, for helping out the Eagles on that one. The problem is with this Giants offense, unless Saquon really hits the home run, and he got loose for a 30-yard scamper in the second half, but mostly kept in check and only had 60 yards on the grounds or so. And this forced Daniel Jones to beat the Eagles defense with his arm, and it was just simply not up to the task. The receivers have been solid in this recent run, but they just came up small. I mean, Richie James had an opportunity to have a walk-in touchdown in the second half, but just dropped it, and that was pretty much sucking up all the life out of this New York Giants team. The Eagles' offensive line set the tone, and this forced the New York Giants defensive line to play off kilter for most of this game. They paved the way for the rushing attack to combine for 268 yards on the ground and really wore down, especially towards the end of the first half. In the second half, they had little to no resistance. Kenny Gainwell came off the bench, and he's arguably the third back on the roster. And he had 100 yards on the ground with very limited carries. Just really explosive game by him. And Miles Sanders was phenomenal in this game as well. I mean, he had a lot of nice carries that really set up a lot of body blows for the knockout punch that was Kenny Gainwell in this game. Jalen Hurts looked great in this game. I mean, from the second play from scrimmage, he lofted a deep pass to Devontae Smith, and he was able to run the ball with conviction too. And with that component of this Eagles offense that you can use that read option to position, I mean, it's just so hard to beat, and that was unfortunately what the Giants had to learn for the third time this season. The biggest thing was with the offensive line setting the tone. They were able to control the clock for most of this game, and there was a huge disparity in time of possession of more than 10 minutes. Huge shout out to Lane Johnson. I mean, he's coming into this game with a torn adductor muscle in his groin, and he pretty much shut down Kayvon Thibodeau for the whole game. And to do this at 80% is still showing that Lane Johnson is an elite tackle in this league. And now the Eagles are moving on to their second NFC Championship game appearance in 5 years, and they did it in dominant fashion. The Bengals took exception to tickets already being posted for a potential neutral game AFC Championship game in Atlanta if the Bills were to advance. From the opening drive, the Cincinnati Bengals showcased their highly potent offensive attack, pretty much having their way with the Buffalo Bills defense, controlling tempo, running up the score early to be up 14-0 in that first quarter. It just never seemed like the Bills were in this game, and they really missed a guy like Von Miller, as they had little to no pass rush on Joe Burrow, who was missing 3 out of his 5 offensive linemen coming into this game. And if you think the Bills defense couldn't be any more toothless, they ended up losing Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer on the same play, which added further insult to injury. And basically, I mean, they just were never in this game. Offensively, they couldn't get anything going. Josh Allen was a mess from start to finish. A lot of forced throws that were nearly intercepted, and then later on one was intercepted in the second half. He had a lost fumble as well that was taken back due to replay, but I think that should have stood on the field. And their O-line got pushed around and created little to no space for their running backs. I have to give credit to Cincinnati. They came into this matchup as 6-point underdogs. I frankly thought that was also disrespectful to the Cincinnati Bengals, and now they're moving on in quite dominant fashion, winning 27-10 and setting up an epic AFC Championship rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's time that we anoint Joe Burrow as the second best quarterback in this talented AFC. Josh Allen has routinely been the guy that's supposed to be challenging Patrick Mahomes for the mantle as top QB in the league and at least the conference, but he's just come up too small in too many circumstances. We know that Joe Burrow is undefeated against Mahomes, including last year's AFC Championship game, and he's been doing it in 3 years, which is a smaller body of work compared to Josh Allen, with a patchwork offensive line, must add that. Josh Allen is a very talented quarterback. He's a dual threat guy, but I'm just not sure if we can trust him. He's been very reckless, especially this year, and he really reminds me of Carson Wentz. We've seen both are great athletes who went to smaller universities where they were able to run over these kind of players that were smaller, not as fast as them, and like I said, lesser quality athletes. But the NFL, everybody's fast, everybody's strong, and Carson Wentz paid the price for this, where his body, his confidence, and ultimately his career went down the toilet. And I'm not saying that Josh Allen is going to have the same fate as Carson Wentz, but he doesn't have Brian Dable to save him and discipline him now, so he has to change his style of play, take fewer hits, make the smart play, take the pass underneath rather than going for the home run ball, and just play a little bit smarter. I mean, we've seen that Joe Burrow can do so much in terms of just getting the ball out quick and slicing and dicing defenses, and I know he has a very talented receiving corps, but Josh Allen has just not been able to get the job done. He's 4-4 in his career. He hasn't beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs, but we can talk about this season. I mean, there was just so many turnovers and untimely plays that cost the Bills. I mean, the Vikings game with the botched snap that resulted in a touchdown. There were the Jets game, and these also contributed for the Bills being in the position that they are today as the 2 seed. Those losses proved to be the difference in the AFC standings. So I think it's really time for Josh Allen to look in the mirror and change his game, and we definitely have to continue to give Joe Burrow credit, as he's just been phenomenal in his very young career. What an elite defensive battle we saw Sunday afternoon between the Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are moving on, beating the Cowboys 19-12. Brock Purdy in particular was very solid. I mean, he just did his role, made no turnovers, didn't put the defense in bad situations, as most of the time Dallas had to go the full length of the field. Dallas did do a pretty good job of moving the ball between the 20s against this vaunted 49ers defense, but there were a key few mishaps in plus side territory that really were the difference in this game. And a big factor also in this has been the lack of confidence in Brett Maher. We all know about last week with the 4 missed extra points. He missed another one in their opening touchdown that was blocked, and even if it wasn't blocked, you could just see at the trajectory it was going to be wide left by a wide margin. He struggled in warm-ups too, so just to add on to that lack of confidence. So they really had to go for touchdowns rather than settle for field goals, so they would wind up with nothing to show for in these good drives. A key red zone interception by Dak Prescott allowed the 49ers to take a 9-6 lead heading into halftime, and these were really big. I mean, points were coming at a premium, and the 49ers offense was able to get down the field and get into Robbie Gould's field goal range to go up. With the game tied at 9 heading into the fourth quarter, the 49ers went ahead thanks to a Christian McCaffrey touchdown run. Dallas had a few opportunities to either tie or take the lead. They only mustered 3 more points in the fourth quarter. Dak Prescott really came up small. You could definitely give him somewhat of an excuse with the fact that they were missing Tony Pollard, who left this game due to a severe ankle injury. It just seemed that he got rolled up, similar to how Mahomes got rolled up in the Saturday matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I think this is much more severe as he was carted off the field. I feared that he potentially broke his leg, so hopefully he's okay. Still, Dak, like I said, he came up small, and there were just so many opportunities for him to take over this game. Show the NFL world that you have this big contract and you are worthy of this big contract. With the chance to tie the game, he went 3 and out, including a near interception and taking a sack. Pretty much ended all hope for Dallas at this point. I mean, they just didn't get the job done, and now they're going home and missing out on the NFC Championship game for the 28th consecutive year. There were just too many times that Dallas was undisciplined. We saw a couple late hit out of bounds penalties. There were some personal fouls. And then with the waning seconds, I mean, you could have gotten a decent look at a Hail Mary attempt, but Dalton Schultz just lost track of fundamentals. He got way too nonchalant with the out of bounds play and didn't get the second foot in bounds bounds instead of dragging his toe to keep 2 feet in bounds. So that forced the Dallas Cowboys to go in some wacky play at the end of the game that made no sense either. I mean, it was a weird formation that Zeke was actually the center. He got killed, and they tried to do a quick out, didn't set up even a lateral, so it was game over. This is typical Dallas. They are front running, they are disorganized, and just another wasted year. The 49ers are moving on to the NFC Championship game for the second consecutive year. The NFC Championship game is featuring two of the better teams of the conference. They've been looking like very dominant teams. Now, the Eagles had a much more dominant start. They started off the season 8-0, then a minor slip up in December after Jalen Hurts had to miss a couple games due to that sprained shoulder, but he looked great in their matchup against the New York Giants and doesn't seem to show any signs of restrictions due to that injury. The 49ers overcame a litany of injuries in their quarterback room, with their day one starter Trey Lance missing the season due to a broken leg in just the second game of the year. Then Jimmy Garoppolo came in, had a great run, and then he also is out for the rest of the year due to a broken foot. So that brought on Brock Purdy, who has been undefeated since starting as the third quarterback in the depth chart for the 49ers, and it's been very impressive. I mean, he's a game manager, but he's been doing very well when called upon. They also made plenty of adjustments. I mean, they made a great trade mid-season to pick up Christian McCaffrey from the Carolina Panthers, and he's just added a whole nother dimension to this 49ers offense that already had Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I think the biggest X factor to watch out for in this game has to be Brock Purdy playing his first road playoff game in Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field. We know it's a very hostile environment. We saw Daniel Jones come up small in that environment. It's surely a possibility that he could overcome it and quiet those demons, but it's no easy feat. He's a rookie, and they have to definitely be concerned about the cadences and the noise levels. The road playoff games are just a whole nother atmosphere, so that's something he has yet to experience. Once again, we have to start with the matchups in the trenches. With the 49ers defensive line, it is very, very talented. We have the leading sack man in Nick Bosa. We have Armstead, and a bevy of talent across the board that is going to be a menace to block for, but they're going to face probably their toughest test in the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line that touts 3 Pro Bowlers and then 2 alternates, so they are all very talented. And remember, Stoutland University is the best in the league, and we're going to see this battle of strengths and see really who dictates the line of scrimmage. And then to flip to the other side, it's still a very interesting matchup. The 49ers also have a very good offensive line led by Trent Williams, all-pro left tackle, and then the Eagles have a very good defensive line. They led the league in sacks, and they have a plethora of pass rushers led by Hassan Reddick, who is coming off a very good game. I mean, they just have so many bodies to throw, and I'm going to be really interested to see how the 49ers try to keep these pass rushers out of Brock Purdy's face. The back end favors the Eagles as they tout the league's best cornerback duo in Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Adding CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot cornerback position is going to be a big help too, because they can line up Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, or even Deebo Samuel in the slot, and he's been really good in matching up against slot receivers, as he used to play slot cornerback back in his days in New Orleans. But he can also be used in timely blitzes too, or also play safety, so that's going to be another great tool for Jonathan Gannon to use in his defensive scheme. Now, these pass catchers for the San Francisco 49ers are also very good, so the secondary is going to have its handful, so it'll come down to if the pass rush can get home and kind of speed up that clock against Brock Purdy. Offensively, the Eagles have that duo of wide receivers in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. They're just like the 49ers, who have a great trio of pass catchers, so do the Eagles. And I think, again, this favors the Eagles because we know that the secondary can be a little bit susceptible against elite receivers. We've seen that DK Metcalf had a great day against Tre'Davious Ward, and also CeeDee Lamb tore up the 49ers too for over 100 yards. The Eagles have 2 elite receivers and also a very good tight end, so that definitely, I think, favors the Eagles in this matchup. And then to talk about the Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts, I mean, he just brings so many dynamic aspects to the offense. He's looking very healthy, as we saw last week against the New York Giants, and I think that will be the difference in this game. There'll be some instances that he has to make plays with his legs when all coverages are locking up these receivers, and it's going to come down to if the 49ers can deploy a spy or try to limit that running capability that Jalen has. I love the story of Brock Purdy, but I do think playing on the road is a big factor in this. Maybe if this matchup was in San Francisco, he'd be fine. But I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles to win this heavyweight fight between two NFC powerhouses. These conference championship games are very, very exciting, and we get a rematch in the AFC championship game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a little bit different than last season where we saw Tyreek Hill play for the Chiefs and also a healthy Patrick Mahomes. And this year, Mahomes is definitely going to be hobbled by this high ankle sprain that he suffered on Saturday. The Chiefs do have an improved defense. They revamped their secondary, and also their pass rush is very good too. They finished second in the league with 55 sacks as a team, led by Chris Jones, their Pro Bowl defensive tackle. And I see them trying to exploit a maligned Cincinnati Bengals O-line. They did also suffer an injury in their center, so that could be their fourth compromised offensive lineman, and I don't know when these injuries could catch up to a guy like Joe Burrow, but he's been doing a great job with getting the ball out very quickly. Now, we do know last year against the LA Rams was too much to overcome, and a guy like Aaron Donald disrupted the game for many parts of this game, and I think Chris Jones could very well make his mark, similar to that matchup like Aaron Donald did in that Super Bowl. The Bengals have an elite trio of receivers in Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, and don't forget about Hayden Hurst, who's been very good in the postseason, and that's been a big factor why Cincinnati hasn't lost since Halloween. The Chiefs will have to have a heavy dose of Travis Kelce, as he has been their leading receiver, and he's the killer of all zone defenses. I mean, he just slices and dices zone defenses so many times with just sitting down after a simple hitch route and getting a lot of yards on the yak. So look out for that. The Bengals will have to be disciplined in their tackling. They'll have to use exotic looks in coverage schemes to try and limit Travis Kelce. But the Chiefs also have some other options. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, they have Juju Smith-Schuster, and also they can use Sky Moore as well as a different receiver. Another aspect they could use is Isaiah Pacheco, who's been very good in this recent stretch after being implemented as the go-to back, and definitely they can use a guy like Jared McKinnon, who's been a very solid third down back who can catch out of the backfield too. The Bengals have been the only team to give this Mahomes-led Chiefs team any sort of trouble, as they beat the Kansas City Chiefs 3 times in the calendar year of 2022. I see the same effect in this matchup too, just because that Mahomes is going to be a little gimpy. That high ankle sprain isn't going to be any significantly better within a week's time, and I think that there's just going to be too many limitations in his mobility, and that will be the difference in this game. So give me the Cincinnati Bengals in this epic duel, and they'll advance to their second consecutive Super Bowl. So that's all I have for you for this episode of Spectator Sports. Like I mentioned, please like and subscribe, and also take a look at our Spotify page. The audio from this podcast will be up there shortly, and take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. All links are in the description. Until next time, I'll see you then.